All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tackling a huge topic for any language teacher. How do we actually build and measure real receptive skills? We're going to move past just teaching test-taking tricks and focus on how to build deep, authentic listening and reading skills in our students.
But to move forward, we actually have to take a step back and really understand a big challenge in language testing that's been around for a long, long time.
You have to start by asking yourself this one tough question. Are the tests you're giving genuinely measuring how well a student understands something, or are they just measuring how good they are at figuring out the test itself? It's a really critical difference.
So for a long time, the old way of testing was what's called a discrete point approach. The idea was, hey, if you test all the little pieces, a little grammar here, some vocabulary there, then you've tested the whole thing. But the problem is, this leads to tasks that just feel fake and don't look anything like how we use language in the real world.
And this is the exact gap that experts like Weir pointed out. See, a student might know all the grammar rules. That's what we call linguistic competence. But can they actually use the language to understand something? That's performance ability. And realizing this difference is what started the whole search for better, more authentic ways to test communication.
So, if we want to assess skills deeply, it makes sense that we have to teach them deeply first. Before we can even think about designing better tests, let's look at how to build the skills themselves, using Jeremy Harmer's fantastic framework. Harmer's big idea is all about balance. On one hand, you've got the intensive stuff we do in the classroom, where we really dig into a text with the teacher's help, analyze the language, and build specific skills. But on the other hand, we need to encourage extensive work, where students just read or listen for fun, building up their fluency on their own. You absolutely need both.
Now, a huge part of this is using what we call authentic texts. What does that mean? Well, it's the real stuff. Things that were made for native speakers, not just for language learners. We're talking menus, news articles, radio shows. This is how you close the gap between the classroom and the real world.
But Harmer was also a realist. He knew that if you hand a brand new learner a newspaper article, it's just going to be overwhelming. So for beginners, the goal is to find materials that are adjusted for their level, but still feel as much like real English as possible. They need to feel real, not like some sterile exercise from a textbook.
Okay, so we've got a great framework for teaching, but how do we measure the skills we're building? For that, we're going to turn to the work of H. Douglas Brown, who gives us a super detailed map of what comprehension really looks like.
Brown splits receptive skills into two main buckets. You've got your micro skills, that's the bottom-up, nitty-gritty stuff, like recognizing sounds and words and grammar, and then you have your macro skills. That's the top-down, big-picture understanding, getting the main idea, figuring out the purpose, and reading between the lines. A truly skilled listener is doing both of these things at the same time.
And this just illustrates the depth perfectly. You see the micro skills, those fundamental building blocks, like telling different sounds apart. Then you have the macro skills, the really high-level thinking, like figuring out cause and effect, or knowing when someone is being sarcastic versus literal. This whole thing is basically a comprehensive checklist for what a really good listening test should be trying to measure.
Okay, so armed with this incredibly detailed checklist of what real comprehension looks like, we can now use it as a lens to look at our old testing methods and start designing assessments that feel truly authentic.
So here it is, the crucial point. Brown argues that so many of those traditional multiple-choice, fill-in-the-bubble tests are just contrived, they're artificial. They hardly ever ask a student to use the full range of micro and macro skills in a way that looks anything like real life.
So what's the alternative? Well, it's about communicative tasks that get students to do something with the language. Think about note-taking. Listening to a lecture and taking notes forces you to pull out the main ideas and see the structure. Those are key macro skills. Or how about retelling? You listen to a story and then you summarize it. That proves you understood the gist, the purpose, and the key info.
So let's put it all together now. When you combine Harmer's teaching strategies with Brown's ideas about assessment, you can create this really powerful, effective cycle of teaching and learning.
Here is the whole solution in a nutshell. You design your lessons using Harmer's balanced approach, a mix of intensive practice and extensive exposure to real-world texts. Then, when it's time to test, you use Brown's framework of micro and macro skills to create communicative tasks like note-taking instead of just simple multiple-choice questions. What you get is this amazing feedback loop, where your deep teaching is confirmed and strengthened by meaningful assessment.
And that's really the main takeaway here. The ultimate goal for all of us should be to design our lessons and our tests to build tough, resilient, real-world language skills, not just to create better test takers. So, the final question I'll leave you with is this. Will your next lesson build true, lasting capability?